Luckin Coffee's story begins with a simple promise. Make coffee feel as easy as ordering anything else on a phone. Launched in China with an app-first model, Luckin leaned into mobile ordering, pickup-focused stores, and heavy promotions to attract busy urban customers. This approach fit a moment when digital payments and delivery habits were already mainstream. The company didn't try to copy the third place cafe atmosphere. Instead, it aimed for convenience, scale, and repeat purchases driven by coupons and fast service. In its early phase, Luckin expanded at a remarkable pace. New locations appeared quickly across cities, and marketing campaigns encouraged customers to buy frequently by lowering the perceived cost of each cup. Growth became part of the brand identity. More stores, more users, more orders. For many observers, this looks like a new kind of consumer company, one powered by data rather than decor. Rapid expansion created a powerful narrative for investors as well, a local challenger to global coffee leaders built for China's mobile era. In 2019, Luckin listed American depository shares on NASDAQ, bringing international capital into the story. The public listing increased visibility and put greater emphasis on reported metrics, revenue growth, customer acquisition, and store economics. But very fast growth has a hidden cost. It stretches systems. When a company opens many locations quickly, it must coordinate leasing, supply chain, staffing, training, promotions, and accounting processes at the same time. It also must track huge volumes of small transactions, orders, discounts, vouchers, and reimbursements across many sites. That kind of environment can produce gaps if internal controls, oversight, and auditing capacity do not scale as quickly as the store count. Another pressure point is incentives. A high growth company often sets aggressive targets, and teams may be rewarded for hitting numbers tied to sales, orders, or expansion milestones. When targets are demanding and the pace is intense, the risk rises that people prioritize the metric over the underlying business reality. This does not mean problems are inevitable, but it means governance and monitoring must be especially strong. Luckin's model also relied heavily on promotions. Discounts can be a rational strategy to build habits, but they complicate financial reporting. When customers pay less due to coupons, or when vouchers are funded through marketing programs, the company must classify revenue and expenses correctly. Doing this consistently across a fast moving retail network requires strict processes, clear approvals, and effective supervision. By early 2020, the market started receiving signals that not everyone believed the growth story. A report circulated publicly raising concerns about the company's sales data and operating claims, pointing to methods such as reviewing receipts and observing store activity. The public debate wasn't only about the numbers, it was about whether the systems behind those numbers were trustworthy. Soon after, Luckin's board formed a special committee to oversee an internal investigation into issues that had been raised. Then, in April 2020, the company disclosed that the investigation had found fabricated transactions beginning in April 2019 and that reported net revenue for 2019 had been inflated. For anyone trying to learn from this case, the early lesson is not growth is bad. The lesson is that growth is a stress test. The faster a company scales, the more it must invest in controls, audit readiness, and a culture where reporting accuracy matters as much as expansion. Luckin had built an exciting consumer narrative, digital, convenient, and ambitious. But once trust in the reporting weakened, the story changed from how fast can you grow to how reliable is what you're telling the world. In the next part, we'll walk through what the investigation disclosed, how the issue became public, and why the structure of promotions and transactions can make misreporting easier to hide, until it isn't. When Luckin disclosed the results of its internal investigation in April 2020, it wasn't a small correction or a minor accounting dispute. The company said the special committee found fabricated transactions beginning in April 2019 and that the effect was an inflation of 2019 net revenue. That single statement changed how investors interpreted everything that came before it: store growth, customer demand, and the apparent momentum of the brand. Why did this matter so much? Because financial statements are not just paperwork. They are the language that connects a company to the public markets. Investors can accept strategic losses, heavy promotions, and rapid expansion when they believe the underlying reporting is faithful. But when reported sales are not reliable, it becomes difficult to judge anything else: unit economics, payback periods, or whether demand is organic. Regulators later described the issue in direct terms. The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission said Luckin materially misstated revenue, expenses, and net operating loss in a way that made the company appear to achieve rapid growth and increased profitability and to meet earnings estimates. Even for people who don't follow accounting closely, the implication is clear. The picture presented to investors did not match reality. In environments with high transaction volume, fabricated or unsupported transactions can be difficult to detect quickly, especially when combined with complex promotional programs. Consider how many moving parts can exist in a modern retail payment flow: app orders, coupon redemptions, vouchers issued and redeemed, partner promotions, delivery fees, and refunds. Each piece has rules, approvals, and documentation. If controls are weak, it becomes easier for false entries to blend into noise. The special committee's work suggested a timeline: fabrication beginning in April 2019, meaning it occurred during a period when the company was scaling quickly and the market was closely watching quarterly growth. The market reaction to disclosures like this is often not only about the immediate number, it's also about what else might be wrong, what oversight failed, and whether leadership and governance can respond effectively. Another key turning point was trading and listing status. Reuters reported that trading was halted in early April 2020 and that NASDAQ later moved toward delisting proceedings. Later, the SEC noted that Luckin's ADS traded on NASDAQ until July 13, 2020. The path from public listing to removal happened quickly by stock market standards, and it reinforced the idea that the company had entered a trust crisis. The human side of this story is also important. When a public company announces that transactions were fabricated, it affects more than shareholders. Employees worry about jobs, suppliers worry about payment reliability, and customers wonder whether stores will remain open. At moments like this, communications must be calm, factual, and consistent. Overly dramatic messaging can increase anxiety. Overly defensive messaging can reduce credibility. From an educational standpoint, this phase of the Luckin story highlights how trust can shift suddenly. A company can spend years building a brand and weeks losing confidence in its reporting. It also demonstrates why governance structures matter. Boards form committees and hire outside experts not as a formality, but because independence and expertise are crucial when allegations appear. In the next part, we'll examine the market's role, how outside research, internal governance, and regulatory scrutiny interacted, and what this teaches about verifying business claims in high growth consumer companies. The Luckin case is often discussed as a clash between a fast growing consumer narrative and the slower, methodical work of verification. Before the company's April 2020 disclosure, there were already public questions raised by an outside report that claimed to examine store activity and transaction evidence. Regardless of how any one report is judged, the broader point is that public markets contain many validators, analysts, journalists, auditors, regulators, and independent researchers who evaluate whether a company's claims are consistent with observable reality. In consumer retail, some claims are easy to test: store traffic, pricing, product availability, and customer behavior. But financial integrity is harder to check from the outside. Public filings provide totals. Outsiders rarely see the underlying transaction level data. That's why internal controls and audit processes are so critical. A healthy system is designed so that if someone tries to record revenue that does not match real activity, multiple checkpoints can catch the mismatch through reconciliations, approvals, and independent review. A common learning from cases like this is that data-driven companies can still have vulnerable reporting if the data pipeline is not properly governed. An app-based business generates enormous amounts of information, but quantity of data is not the same as quality of controls. If controls focus on growth dashboards rather than accounting discipline, problems can go undetected longer than expected. The Reuters reporting around the period shows how quickly exchange scrutiny intensified. Trading was halted in early April 2020, and NASDAQ moved toward delisting steps not long after. When trading is halted, the market is essentially saying we need clarity before price discovery can be trusted. This is not only a financial event, it is a confidence signal. What makes this case especially instructive is the combination of speed and scale. High promotions can inflate activity metrics like orders and registered users. Store count growth can create an impression of dominance, but accounting requires careful matching of what happened economically with what was recorded financially. When incentives emphasize expansion, it becomes easier for organizations to treat reporting as an output to be managed rather than a reality to be described. The SEC later frames the case as defrauding investors through misstatements about revenue and losses. For viewers trying to build financial literacy, it helps to translate this into a simple principle. If the top line is not reliable, performance narratives are fragile. Even if a company has a real product and real customers, misreporting can damage access to capital and partnerships. Another angle is cross-border accountability. A company operating primarily in China but listed in the US faces multiple oversight environments and different enforcement constraints. This can increase complexity in investigations and settlements. It also raises the bar for transparent, consistent disclosures because investors cannot easily rely on informal local knowledge to understand what's happening. Yet the spotlight phase is not only about blame, it's about response. After a major disclosure, the key question becomes, can the organization rebuild systems, replace weak processes, and establish a culture where accuracy is non-negotiable? This is where governance actions, committee oversight, leadership changes, cooperation with regulators become meaningful, not symbolic. In the next part, we'll follow the legal and financial consequences, the SEC penalty, investor settlements, and how the company tried to stabilize operations while restructuring obligations. After Luckin's disclosure, the consequences unfolded across several fronts at the same time: regulatory action, investor claims, exchange status, and financial restructuring. Each stream reinforced the same central issue. Trust in reported performance had been damaged, and rebuilding would require both accountability and practical solutions. In December 2020, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission announced that Luckin agreed to pay a $180 million penalty to settle charges related to misleading investors about revenue, expenses, and operating losses. The SEC's description emphasized that the reporting created the impression of rapid growth and improved profitability. For a public company, such enforcement is not only a financial cost, it becomes a permanent part of the company's reputation and regulatory history. At the same time, investors pursued civil claims. Reuters reported that in October 2021, Luckin reached a $175 million settlement of shareholder class action claims, alleging that the company inflated its share price by falsifying revenue. This matters because it shows that consequences are not limited to government penalties. In capital markets, loss of confidence can create a cascade: stock declines, lawsuits, tighter financing, and stricter counterparty terms. The company also faced the practical issue of managing obligations while continuing day-to-day operations. Reuters reported that Luckin sought U.S. Chapter 15 bankruptcy protection in February 2021, describing it as part of a process to assist with restructuring while keeping stores operating. Chapter 15 is often used in cross-border restructuring contexts, and its presence in this story signals that the company needed a legal framework to manage complex creditor relationships. From an educational viewpoint, this phase teaches an important distinction. A consumer brand can remain visible to customers even while its corporate structure is under stress. People may still buy coffee, stores may still open, and employees may continue working while behind the scenes the company is negotiating settlements, responding to regulators, and reorganizing debts. Operations and corporate finance are interconnected, but they move on different timelines. The most difficult part of such a period is that almost every stakeholder wants something different. Customers want reliability and value. Employees want stability and fair treatment. Creditors want clarity on repayment. Regulators want accountability. Investors want accurate information and remedies. A company in this position has to communicate carefully, focusing on what it can control: transparent reporting, operational continuity, and credible remediation steps. There is also a subtle lesson about governance design. When a board forms a special committee and announces findings, it creates a reference point for legal and regulatory outcomes. That reference point can shape negotiations and settlements later because it outlines the scope and timing of what was found. But consequences are not the end of the story. Some companies do not survive a trust crisis, others rebuild. The direction depends on leadership decisions, operational fundamentals, and whether reforms are deep or cosmetic. In Luckin's case, the following years became a test of whether a company can recover credibility through execution. In the next part, we'll look at the restructuring steps and the operational turnaround narrative, how the company positioned itself after delisting, how governance changed, and what rebuilding can look like in practical terms. Rebuilding after a reporting breakdown requires two forms of work that must happen together: structural repair and operational improvement. Structural repair involves legal settlements, debt restructuring, governance changes, and strengthened reporting processes. Operational improvement involves making the business work, serving customers efficiently, managing costs, and ensuring the brand delivers consistent value. Luckin moved through a formal restructuring path in the years after the disclosure. In March 2021, the company announced a restructuring support agreement with holders of its notes, describing expected recovery ranges and a plan to address obligations. Later, the company disclosed steps toward a scheme of arrangement related to restructuring its debt. These announcements reflect a reality that many viewers may not notice. Even consumer-facing businesses that appear straightforward can have complex financing structures that need careful renegotiation after a crisis. Meanwhile, legal and regulatory consequences continued to shape the company's path. The SEC settlement was already on record by late 2020. The class action settlement reported by Reuters in October 2021 added another major obligation and another milestone in resolving the aftermath. Together, these outcomes created a framework where the company could focus more fully on moving forward, provided it could stabilize governance and performance. Leadership and governance are central in any turnaround story. After a breakdown, stakeholders look for clear responsibility and credible oversight. News reporting in later years highlighted leadership changes tied to major shareholders and the company's post-crisis management direction. While each leadership transition has its own internal context, the educational takeaway is that governance is not just who holds titles, it's whether decision making and oversight reduce the chance of repeating past failures. Operationally, Luckin's model, fast service, pickup convenience, and app based ordering, remains appealing to many customers. But rebuilding credibility depends on discipline, accurate reporting, consistent procedures, and a culture where performance improvements are measured honestly. In practice, that means tighter controls over promotions, clearer documentation for transactions, stronger approval workflows, and independent checks that compare reported numbers to underlying activity. A useful way to understand a turnaround is to separate brand popularity from corporate credibility. A brand can be popular for taste, price, and convenience. Corporate credibility comes from reliable disclosures, responsible governance, and predictable financial behavior. Popularity can return quickly. Credibility usually returns slowly through repeated cycles of transparent reporting and steady execution. This phase is also a reminder that markets do not only punish mistakes, they also watch how organizations respond. Cooperation with regulators, completion of restructuring milestones, and clear public disclosures can gradually reduce uncertainty. That does not erase history, but it can create a new baseline for evaluation. What is the company doing now, and are the systems stronger than before? In the next part, we'll examine the later stage outcome, how Luckin's scale and store expansion evolved, how competitive positioning changed, and what long-term lessons, especially about controls, incentives, and verification, can be drawn from the full arc of this case. One of the most striking elements of Luckin's story is that the brand continued to expand after its crisis period, turning the discussion from survival to how a company competes after rebuilding. In later reporting about China's coffee market, Luckin is described as surpassing Starbucks in China by store count, with figures cited around the end of 2024 exceeding 22,000 locations. This shift matters because it shows that consumer demand, operational execution, and competitive strategy can remain powerful even after a severe credibility setback, if the company can keep stores running, refine its model, and maintain customer interest. The market context is important. China's beverage landscape is highly competitive and fast-moving, with consumers open to new flavors, seasonal releases, and value-focused offerings. In such an environment, convenience and pricing strategy can win significant share, especially when paired with an efficient digital operating system. Later commentary on the market highlights how local brands used digital operations and competitive pricing to grow quickly. Yet, scale is not the same as safety. Growing to a very large footprint introduces new risks. quality control, supply chain complexity, franchise-like operational variation even if stores are company-operated, and ongoing pressure to show performance. The core lesson from the earlier breakdown remains relevant. Scale increases the need for strong systems. From a governance perspective, the lasting lesson is that internal controls must be treated as a product, not paperwork. Controls need owners, testing, and continuous improvement. Promotions must have clear funding logic and accounting treatment. Transaction data must be reconciled consistently. Exceptions must be investigated, not explained away, and oversight must be independent enough to challenge optimistic narratives. From an investor education perspective, this case also teaches how to evaluate high-growth stories more carefully. Watch the relationship between growth and complexity. Rapid store openings and promotional intensity can make reported metrics harder to verify and easier to misstate if controls are weak. Treat governance signals as real signals. Special committees, auditor changes, regulatory inquiries, exchange actions, and filings are not just headlines, they are indicators of trust, oversight, and risk. Understand that resolution is multi-step. Government penalties, civil settlements, and restructuring milestones often unfold over years, not months. Separate customer love from reporting reliability. A busy store does not automatically mean financial statements are accurate. Both can be true, but they are proven in different ways. Finally, from a business ethics and management standpoint, the most valuable takeaway is cultural. Companies are shaped by what they reward. If the organization rewards only speed and volume, it may create blind spots. If it rewards accuracy, transparency, and responsible escalation of problems, it can build resilience. A crisis can become a turning point only if the organization genuinely upgrades how it operates, not just how it markets. Luckin's story is therefore not only about a period of misstated performance and the consequences that followed, it is also a broader case study about modern retail, how digital growth narratives are built, how trust can break, and how rebuilding requires both structural repair and daily operational discipline, repeated long enough that stakeholders can believe the system has truly changed.